This Seaside Poppy painting has been one of my most popular paintings, both on YouTube and when people come into my house and look at my paintings, they always seem to gravitate towards this one. And when I painted it, I wanted to capture the feeling of the sea and misty air and just a whole field of poppies blooming. And so somebody saw this painting and wanted the same thing, same idea, but in a larger version and have it be horizontal rather than vertical. So I set up 2 easels and I put 3 18 by 24 inch canvases across the 2 easels. I have a board behind them to help kind of hold them between the easels. It's not a perfect situation, but it does work for now because I want to make sure that each painting flows correctly into the painting next to it. This painting is my triptych sea painting, and I really like it. The land masses flowed together nicely, but you can see that the color is off from one painting to the next. I did 3 different pours, and then I turned it into this triptych. So I'm going to actually go back, that'll be a future video, and touch up the paint colors between the 3 so the 3 paintings flow together better. And if you're interested in the triptych painting, if you click the little eye up here in the upper right hand corner, that'll take you to that video. Okay, so I have my same colors that I started with last time, which is cerulean blue and white, and then I threw in a little bit of light blue. I'm going to go ahead and just take a little bit of artistic freedom with this one. The composition is going to be slightly different, so there may be a little bit of different tones in here. I'm kind of thinking that I'm going to start it sloping down this way and maybe come up and down a little bit here and then go up a bit on this side. I think that would be a nice composition. There might be a little bit of open space here. I might have sort of like a little peekaboo of the ocean. My brother-in-law, Steve, who I'm painting this for, lives on the ocean. So if there's a little bit of sea coming through there, I think that would be nice. So to start with, I'm just using a very small brush, and I'm just kind of plotting in where I think my basic lines will go. And this will be different layers, the sky and the midsection and the base, just like my other painting was. So this midsection just kind of represents some foreground fading off into the distance. So this is basically the sky. This is a midsection of ground that's further away, and this is all foreground down here. So just like the other one, I'm going to be mixing the blue and the white. And this part isn't super important because, just like with my other painting, I am coming back with palette knife later. But this kind of helps me get the feel of what it's going to look like. And I really like this brush. This is a Liquitex 2-inch, and it's nice when I'm doing my larger pieces. Okay, as you can see, I have my sky and the background done, just the base layer. And just like I show in my previous video on Seaside Poppies, the base layer is not super important. Don't worry about any kind of detail because this will all be covered with palette knife. Now, one thing I wanted to mention, when you're working with a piece this large, especially if you live in a place like I do, which is the Southwest desert, it can dry out as you work, and the paints can dry out rather quickly. I use acrylics. If that happens, just keep a spray bottle nearby. You can either squirt the canvas itself very, very lightly, or you can just mist over your paint. So I just have a whole mix on my plate here. I have my green gold, my white, the Titan buff, and the warm gray that I had before, which actually looks more like beige to me, but it's called warm gray. This is hooker green, And Hooker's green is very, very bright, and that's why I brought in this deeper gold, which is raw sienna. And the raw sienna and the yellow, and all of this will just be sort of mixed up to put in this base layer. So you can see here that that is very, very dark and quite bright, actually. So that's where these other colors come in. And I'll just start laying this in like this. And then I can even come up in here a little bit. And a lot of that color changing and things will be done later when I do my palette knife work. But I still want to kind of get in a base coat layer of something that I really like. Okay, now I have the 3 basic layers in, and they will be changed up a bit as I go along and do my palette knife work. But what I wanted to show you here is I think I have space across here to put just the hint of what looks like the sea. And with my previous painting, you just get the feeling that there could be sea out there because of the colors that I used. But it doesn't have to be. You don't actually see any. So I don't want it to be obvious that it's a sea, but I just want to see if I can fit it in. So if it's the sea, it does need to be actually straight horizontal. And my microphone cord here is pulling a bit. Hopefully that camera is still okay. So I'm using my really nice sewing ruler for this. And all I need is a tiny bit of paint to kind of mark a few spots. So being the sea, and it's not a big rolling wave or anything, so it does need to be horizontal. Perfectly horizontal. And this is pretty nice. I can line it up between the different paintings. This painting here is not sitting quite right, but this is pretty good. Okay, for this part, I'm using one of my favorite palette knives. It's just a plastic knife. I like it though because it doesn't get bends or kinks in it. And it's easy to clean. And I can use either the short side or the longer side. And I only want to use white. I don't want to get any green up in the sky or any other color. Now when I get down into these other layers, then I can mix up colors again. But for now I just want white, and if I get a little bit of blue in it or something, that's okay. And then I just start laying in the palette work. And you can see more detail on that in my previous painting. And you can watch the technique on my original Seascape Poppy painting. So I'm going to go ahead now and finish putting in the sky, and then I'll turn the camera back on and show you what I do with some of the other layers. Okay, now I have my sky in, and I'm pretty happy with that. I'm going to probably leave that as it is. I may touch up some areas later depending on how things look down below, but right now I really like it. This is cerulean blue poking through more in its pure tone. In other areas I mixed it with the white first. So I'm going to experiment by just putting in some horizontal strokes in here. I don't want it to stand out too much, like I mentioned. I may even go over it with my fingers a little bit or a brush. And then I'll put in the foreground palette knife work. Okay, I have chosen a group of colors here that I think will be pretty for the water. This is just called light aqua blue, and this is a light blue. This is Prussian blue, which has a very deep, rich color, and Payne's gray, which I use instead of black. And then I have a little cerulean and some white still. And like I was saying, I don't really want this to show up too much, but I just want the eye to kind of pick up something that could be water. It's still a palette knife painting, and I don't want to take away from that. So we'll just try this out and see how it goes. Now this is not beach along here, this is foreground of flowers. So I have to keep that in mind. Okay, I think I really like this. It's not too much. It's just a hint of an ocean off in the distance there. Okay, now I'm going to start on this area, and I have my blues that I was already using. I've added some raw sienna and burnt sienna. This is the burnt sienna. It's a little bit more to the brown. And my raw sienna, I have my Payne's Gray again and my warm gray. And I'm just going to start throwing that in and try not to think too much about it. You don't want to overthink it. You just start putting some colors down. But I'm going to have to let this dry and go back over it, because it won't really look quite right with just one coat. And when you lay down a lot of paint with a palette knife, I don't know how it is with oils, but with acrylic you can end up pulling it right back off again. So I'm going to continue this kind of a thing on all three of them, and then I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, now just going to keep going with this. You can see that you need layers, and you don't want it to look like it's all exactly the same. So it's okay to come in and sort of rough up some areas, blur out some lines a bit here and there, because this is background, and that's why it's okay to come over areas and not have much on your brush, maybe even, or your palette or whatever you're working with, because you really don't want to have it look like just little exact strokes either. Kind of want it roughed up a little bit here and there. So I'm just going to do a little of that, and I'll know when it's ready. There's no way to really explain that. You just kind of get a feel for it and know that it has enough layers. But this has a ways to go yet. Okay, so I'll keep going with this clear across, and it will take a couple of coats, as I said. And again, I know at this point it looks like a big mess, and you wonder what it's ever going to be, but it should all come together. Okay, now it's starting to take shape, but I can already see that the sky is a lot darker than what I actually want it to be. I want it to be brighter, lighter, because the red poppies are going to be standing up above the grasses here. And I want them to really show up against the sky. The other thing is, in my old painting, this just sort of faded away into the background. So there wasn't a real sharp line here, and I liked that. So I'm going to come back when I go over the sky. I'll bring some of it down into this to kind of soften that edge a bit, so that that just sort of fades away that way. Okay, the center one there is the way that it is really supposed to look. So this is why I say it takes a lot of layers. It's fast to work with a palette knife, but it does take several layers to get the right depth. And the thing that makes it look so good when you're all finished is you can tell there's depth to it. And this has been built up with quite a bit of paint, but it still needs more. So when I come back and blend that, then you'll see how that lightens up, ties in a little more with this, becomes a little more abstract. So I think that will look good. And I'll kind of play around with these colors. Some of these got a little bit muddied as I went along. If you mix certain paints together and go over too many times, you can start getting what's called a muddied look. And it just starts to lose distinction of color. So again, I'll just keep working on that. And any place where you get it too white, if you think you've lost some blue, you can always go back and add just a little touch. But really the blue underneath is so deep that you can put on just pure white and it'll look fine. Okay, so now it's starting to take shape, and as you go along, each time you do a layer, you almost feel like you're putting down too much white. It looks like the whole canvas is just turning white and you wonder what the point is, but the blue will show through underneath. And like I said, you can always go back and add a little bit, but a little bit of blue back in if you really feel that you need to. But I'm going to have to stop now pretty soon anyway, because I'm losing my correct light source here as the sun is starting to go down. It's doing strange things on my canvas here. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this though. And then I'll kind of see what it looks like. And then I can go back another couple days, like I said, and work on the center section some more. Okay, so I know I said I was going to stop when I got my sky in, but I just wanted to show you something. When you come down from one area into the other, it's a good thing to kind of start blending and slowly moving into this next section, like I was saying before. And one good way to do this is, I show this in my other video, but anytime you come down like this, if you go sideways, it sort of softens up that mark that you just did. So it's not so much just a box. You're just sort of smearing it in like that. So I can kind of do this along this area. And see, that sort of takes out a little bit of that sharpness. Okay, now this is about where I want it to be for stopping today. I always say I'm going to stop, and then I have just a little bit more to do. But this is looking much better. Okay, so now I've worked on this a bit more, and I'm happy with how it's coming along. I'm going to continue this on across this way, and I'm starting to think about where I'm going to be placing poppies. So that's why I went back and touched up the sky a little bit. I'll lighten up a little area down here because I am going to have poppies down towards the bottom. But I'll do that after I finish across there. So when you reach this point in the painting, you just kind of keep tinkering with it, and go back and add color here and there until you're really happy with it. The other thing that I do is I make sure that I have my palette knife going back and forth as well as up and down. Plus, any place where it's too obvious of streaks, you can use your fingers or a little sponge or any other type of device that you have, just to kind of smear it around a little bit and make it not quite as distinct. The point is to keep it very abstract. Okay, so now I've reached a point where I'm going to let it dry overnight again, and then I'll come back and add any touch-ups. And as I come up close, you can see that when you get close, there are a lot of streaky areas, and that's good. You don't want perfection. It's okay to be able to see some palette strokes. Now, I don't like it to look obviously real chunky just in certain areas, and that's why I use finger painting and other things like that to sort of spread out the paint a little and give it a little softer look. But that's just kind of a personal preference. Now on this end, you can see where the sky and the grasses and things kind of fade together. I don't yet have that where the ocean is. It's still pretty distinctly ocean and then grass, kind of a hard edge there. So I'm going to change that a little bit. Okay, so like usual, I'm never actually finished when I say I'm finished for the day. I was looking at it and it was just bothering me that this was different. It's all palette knife, just here and there and everywhere, and streaks going however I felt like at the time, and then all of a sudden there was this perfect little ocean. And the more I looked at it, it just seemed out of place. It didn't have the right feel to it then. So I went back with my palette knife and made strokes that were vertical, some sideways. I threw in a couple more little colors, and then I brought the grasses up and mixed in with it. And I like that better now. So you can see there where it's quite a bit different than it was. And I like this look better. I think it ties better with the painting, because I didn't really want that ocean to stand out, and it was standing out too much when it was so different. So when you get up close, you can see imperfections and things, and I think that looks much, much better. I want to point out also that these little types of what you might call imperfections are actually what make the painting interesting. There is a difference between an error that actually stands out and looks strange, and strokes and marks and things that just add interest to the painting and help it have that abstract feel. Like, these don't have to actually be connecting. I actually like that look. I have to kind of fight against perfectionism, because that actually does not work well in an impressionistic or abstract type of piece. I just got back from a really nice 2-week trip. I went back to Kansas and Oklahoma and New Mexico, and I saw a lot of absolutely amazing things. I highly recommend that you get out of your studio now and then and go out and experience things. I came back with a lot of inspiration for new upcoming paintings and videos. And while I was gone, this all dried really, really nicely. I am very happy with the results. I had planned on coming back and adding some more darkness across the bottom, but I don't really think that I need it. I think this is really nice just how it is, and it may have darkened up slightly while I was away, or maybe I'm just looking at it a little differently now. But I have enough darkness here. I don't need to add to that. I may add a little bit on this end. We'll see when it's finished and I go into adding the poppies and things. So what I'm going to do right now is, I have a photo of this that you see on the screen there, and I'm going to go into my Paint Shop program, which is a graphics program, and I'm going to draw in where I think I'm going to put the poppies. And I'll play around with that a little bit before I actually start painting, because I want to be sure of my placement before I start painting. You can hear my cat, we call him Rooster Rudy. My mother-in-law lives with us, and she's away on vacation right now, and he misses her. And he's wonderful company, but he's letting me know he's not really quite happy. So you may hear him today in the background a bit. But anyway, so that's what I'll do now. I'll go ahead and play around with my graphic arts program, and then I'll show you the photo that I have from that with my roughly drawn in poppies, and then I'll show you some of the painting of the poppies themselves. The other thing I should mention is I will be changing the sides. I put a base coat down around the sides as I painted, but they're pretty dark. And of course, I'm not going to leave it like that, because if somebody is sitting on the couch or something and they look up at the painting, you don't really want the sides to stand out. They should blend in with the painting. Either that, or you can paint the sides a solid tone that just sort of fades away into the background. You can do kind of whatever you want with them. But I definitely don't want them to be this brilliant blue that they are right now. So I will fix that when I'm finished with everything else. Okay, what you see right now is actually my drawing with my poppies sort of scattered around. They just represent where I think I'm going to be placing the poppies. Now, as I start to paint, it may end up being a little bit different, but this gives me an idea, at least as a starting point. And I think this looks pretty good. So I will now start throwing in some actual poppies. Okay, you just saw the drawing that I made of where the poppies are going to go. And I placed the drawing right here underneath my actual canvases. And then nearby, I also have my original painting. So I can look at that. to refer to the poppies and how they originally looked. Now, normally I wouldn't worry so much about keeping things just the same. I go with whatever I feel at the moment. But this is a commission piece, and he really liked that original, so while taking some artistic freedom and switching things up a bit, I still want to keep the same flavor as I mentioned before. Okay, now I'm ready to place my first poppy, and I have Grumbacher Red, Raw Sienna, Burnt Umber, and Payne's Gray. And I also have a bright yellow. These colors aren't super important, you just need to have some kind of blend of red. I'm staying away from anything in the magenta line, and Grumbacher Red is a really pretty shade of red. And the gold and some of these other colors add some highlights to the poppy. Now, I have one poppy up here, then another one here, one kind of up here, and then one here and one there, and I may place those first and then I'll fill in. So to start with, like with a lot of my paintings, I put a little bit of one color on my palette, then I have another color, and for the darker colors on the tip. And again, I go through this a lot better in my other video. But I want to kind of make sure of where I'm going to be placing this. So I have my kind of sort of like a little frowning face up here. And see, that shade is already in there for me now. And for this under part, I just kind of turn the palette in a different direction. I come across this way. So the way I usually describe it to people who are first starting is this is a frown, and then that's a smile. Other artists tend to describe it that way too. And then you can come back and fill in a bit here and there, but you don't want to play around with it too much because we're not looking for perfection. And I'm not going to worry about that little bit in there because that will later on be covered up when I come back and add my centers and highlights. So at this point, if I want to, I can add little bits of highlight as well. But I will be coming back later and touching up areas, and you can always take your finger and play around with it a bit too. That might be okay, or I might want it to be a little bit larger, and I can do that by just adding a bit. So there's my first poppy, and like I said, I will go ahead now and place the rest pretty much according to my drawing, and I'll take artistic liberties as I go along. If it doesn't seem to feel quite right the way I had it in my drawing, then I'll change it. Okay, I have the beginning poppies in across the top, and I'm really, really happy with how those turned out. The key is in the size of them and the placement and the relationship to one another. Okay, now you'll notice that there are imperfections in the painting. This little bit of stuff here actually adds interest to the painting. So when you're working with your palette knife, you swipe it across like this. If you get a little trail of paint, just leave it, unless it just really stands out incorrectly. And the same with this one. So I have some dark down in there. I came back with my finger and touched up some places with a little bit of yellow. And some dark areas, I have Payne's Gray and the brown that I mentioned earlier, the golds. So I think this is a really good start. And the centers, when I'm all finished with each flower, I'll come back and determine where the centers go. And then depending on the direction of the flower, that will determine the direction of the stem. I'm ready to put in my stems now, and like my previous painting, I'm going to use a palette knife. And I just have a few colors here. I have raw umber, burnt umber, which are both shades of brown, and my Payne's gray. I'm not using any black because that's a bit harsh. And for the tools, I have a few different tools. For the actual stem, I can just make a quick stroke like that. And for the little buds, I can place them using either this larger palette knife or the smaller one. And I also like to have a small detail brush because I might want to touch up something here and there. When you do a quick run like that with the palette knife, sometimes it may run out in areas that you don't want it to. Now, it actually is good to have it be a little bit skipped. You don't want a perfect line because this is, again, a semi-abstract Impressionist type painting. If I were to paint in really detailed, perfect stems right now, that would be out of place. And so I'll put in the stems, and then I will go back and add a little bit of detail to some of the flowers. What do you say, Rooster Rudy? So this is my cat who's been meowing in the background. We call him Rooster Rudy because he believes he needs to get everybody up every morning at about 5 o'clock. Isn't that right? Rudy. Well, he's not going to look at us today. Okay, to start this, these are my shades of brown. And Rudy, you need to be quiet. To start this, these are my shades of brown. And I may touch it just a tiny bit into the Payne's gray. I can kind of make sure that I have a good amount there. Now I'm going to just do a quick stroke, and it may even kind of fade away, see, like that. And that's fine because it's fading away into the background. Now for this flower, you can see that it's going this way. You want to make sure that your stems go in the correct direction. If it came out this way, it would appear as if the flower was tilting sideways on the end there, and that wouldn't really be good. I place the center that way, so you can almost draw a line right through, and that tells me that the stem needs to come that way. And that's all there is to the stems. This one can be kind of anywhere. It's just kind of giving the hint of stems flowing through the background. They're kind of fun to do. They can be a little scary when you get to this point because you feel like, oh, I don't want to mess up anything. But if you do, all you'd have to do is just go back and paint over some areas. So you almost want to be kind of quick and not think about it too much. So now I have basic stems in. It doesn't take much. And then I'll go back and add the little buds. And for that, I just pick up quite a bit of paint. I want it fairly well covered on the back. And I just can plop that down like that. So to add the stem to these, I just go like that. And that's almost all I need. I will go back and touch up a little bit on the buds. Now, depending on your painting, you can actually bring in a little bit lighter color if you want. But again, I don't want that too perfect. So just kind of adding a little bit here. And you just sort of have to decide for yourself where these should go. And I kind of use this, time as a great time to fill in any place that I think might need a little bit of help. And then again, I need some little stems here. So this painting is about done. I'm now going to use my favorite little Frazzly brush to touch up a little bit on some of the flowers. Okay, this is my little Frazzly brush. You'll see it used in a lot of my videos. It's a brush that used to be some type of outliner, but as you can see, I pretty well destroyed it. But I use it for making sea foam and all kinds of little details on painting. So if you have a brush that you feel is ruined, keep it, because you'll use it for special things. If I were doing this for a room that had, say, a little bit of lavender in it or some other tone that I wanted to bring in, I could always mix that with a paint. And I could have a little bit scattered through the background, and it wouldn't be an obviously lavender painting, but the color would still tie in. So you have a lot of play here with color. This yellow that I'm using is really nice. It's Liquitex Heavy Body Acrylic Cadmium Yellow Medium Hue. So I'm happy with this one. I'm going to let it be just as it is, and I'll let it sit over the next few days, and I may decide to add one more little bud or touch up the flowers a little bit more. But basically I'm quite happy with that. I think it's finished. Now pause the video and write down these 3 links. One is to my art website. You can get a lot more ideas and inspiration from that site. And then the other link is to my craft and sewing site. And that's where I have my free patterns that go with a lot of my videos. And this link that I'm showing is the link to the exact page that has those patterns. And that can be very helpful. The other link is to my Instagram page. And you'll want to write that one down too. That'll help keep you up to date on things that I'm working on. Okay, I'm now finished with it, and I'm really, really happy with it. So I'm going to come in for some close-ups. It's a little bit hard to get really good lighting here for a video, but this gives you a feel for what it looks like. So I added just enough of the little buds to fill in some areas. And I did bring a little bit of darkness down in the bottom of this one to the left, and I also brought in a little bit more of the bright green. So again, remember to write down the links and follow me on Instagram and my websites so that you don't miss anything in the future. Thank you very much for watching my video, and I hope you have fun with it.